Welcome to everybody on a Saturday morning here. Fantasy Firebox. I'm your host, Tony Jigsaw Cutillo, joined by Pittsburgh John Kocur. And one thing's for sure, if it's Pittsburgh John Kocur, it's Major League Baseball time. I understand that we're still in negotiations, right? We get it. We you never know what's going to happen, but this is the most important part, John. No matter what, when it happens, it's going to happen fast. You're going to have to be ready because you may get word, hey, season's starting in 2 weeks, and the drafts are going to be apparent. They're already going on anyway, but there's going to be some movement. We're going to talk about that. This is going to be a general overview show. Again, follow us at Heat Ratio Sports, at Win Daily Sports on all social formats. Make sure you check out all the affiliate links in there to get some free money as well. But what I want to do today, John, is again, there's so many question marks that aren't going to be answered right now. But the main thing to start off with this show is just looking right at the top. And before we came on right off air, I was like, hey man, who's that consensus number one pick overall? Right? Is it Fernando Tatis? Is it Juan Soto? Could it be Trey Turner? Could it be Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? Where does Bryce Harper fall off of a unbelievable MVP campaign? So a lot of question marks. So pivoting right to you, right to start the show off, man. Consensus wise, who's that number one gem that not just you, but everybody else is looking at?
I think it's Tatis. He has the skill set. He put up the stats. It doesn't help that he's one of the most energizing players in Major League Baseball. I mean, he reminds me back in the day of Ken Griffey Jr. with the backwards hat. This guy,
Yes.
he can get a resurgence of baseball fans out there. He's electric. He's exciting to watch. He's fun. And he got the numbers to back it up. I mean, he's everything you want, except for that shoulder that continues to pop out. And
Yes.
that scares me, even though, I think he had it happen twice this past year. Dislocated shoulder. Was it called an impingement maybe? Or no, subluxation, I think. Well, regardless, it's the shoulder dislocates and it pops right back in. And he's had this problem going back, years. At first, when he first got injured, it looked like he was going to be out for a month or something. He's back in the minimum 7 or 10 days off the injured list. And then he did it again, same thing, talked about having off-season surgery. So for whatever reason, opted not to have it. And I'm sorry, 2 stints for that dislocated shoulder last year, even though they were short, it scares me. It's a recurring problem. I don't know how many games. I can't guarantee you that he's going to miss games, but my feeling is he is going to miss games. It's a question of how many. And when you're looking at a 12-team or more draft, you can't blow that number one overall pick, because then that means,
No.
now you're talking your 24th pick really has to anchor your team. So, he's number one, but he scares me, and I couldn't do it at number one, knowing that there's other safer options.
Yeah, I tend to agree, man. Even though this guy is so electric, right? He's so electric. And I remember last year when we came in and we were doing a show last year. I know I was all about him. You were all about him. I actually had Juan Soto last year coming in as my number one overall guy. I said I would go Juan Soto. Wasn't a bad pick. Obviously this year, kind of the same, right? But here's what I would say. There's so many question marks with a couple of those guys, right? So now you got Juan Soto decides to turn down the extension for Washington. What's going to go on with that? We have no idea. Sometimes players, when they have that kind of stuff around their head, they don't play off the expectations. It's Juan Soto, though, so I don't think that'll happen. You talk about Tatis with the shoulder injury, right? Trey Turner with his new surroundings, even though when he went to LA, he excelled. So no reason to think it wouldn't. But what about the wild card with Vlad? Because again, Vlad is he's a beast, man. Like, we talked about Tatis, but would you see any? And again, I know that he's probably the number 4 option to being number 1, but is there any big argument on why he shouldn't be the top overall pick?
Not really. Last year was the first year that his batting average really came around. He was his hitting tool is spectacular, but he was still, muddling around in the 270 range for his first 2 years. Well, last year he finally broke out. So, is he going to maintain that batting average? Because that also, oftentimes that gets overlooked. We're looking at, a 35 home run guy, 100 ribbies, 100 runs, chip in some stolen bases. But there is a difference, especially in, rotisserie when you're talking categories, from a 311 hitter and a 270 hitter putting up those same type of stats. So, I mean, he can mash the ball. Obviously after his, season last year, the only thing that holds him back is really the stolen bases. And that's rotisserie. You're talking points. He's right up there in the conversation. Rotisserie, his stolen bases are non-existent, but in reality, okay, so what's Soto going to chip in 10? It's not like he's really crushing it. And even Turner, the days of him stealing 50 bags are long gone. Like he'll still get 25, 30. He'll be in the top 10 in stolen bases, but he also doesn't have that same power, at least historically. Even at Dodger Stadium, he doesn't have the power that really matches with those other guys.
It's funny because here goes, what's up, Joe? Checking in on Sunday morning. Joe's probably fresh from the gym, pumping it up. Says, will Trout return to form after the longest calf injury known to man? He could have had a transplant in the time span of his injury. Listen, that's an interesting question, John, because I was wondering the same thing. Like, where does Mike Trout? I've seen him as low as 15, even as low as 20, as high as 10. Like, what do you make of Mike Trout with this very suspicious season-long calf injury?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You look at the past 2 years. I mean, I don't think he's gotten over 200 at bats. And even in the 2 years prior, he didn't get up above 500 at bats. Even though if you're getting 470 or so out of him, you're getting a full year top 10 player, even though he's getting 80 less bats than some of the other guys. He could definitely bounce back, but my fear is he's still going towards the end of the top, end of the first round, which, can definitely turn in value because he could finish the year top 3. But could he also put up another 200 at bat season and it's a wasted pick? So, yeah, I mean, I think late first, it really just depends on that grouping. I'll take him. But yeah, there's definitely question marks. I mean, he hasn't had above 500 bats since 5 years ago. So
2016, last time, 549. Since then, 402, 471, 470. Then obviously the glaring issue, 2020, 53 games, 2021, 36 games combined, a little bit over 300 at bats. So that's definitely something to be concerned about.
Yeah, and we did have the shortened season, so I don't want that to quite sway things. But it's still been, the historicals on him. He's not getting over 500 at bats.
Right. And he's still only 30. Right. Yep. So that's what people have to, as much as, again, I get it, but he's still only 30, right? And that's what you have to look at. And right now, if you just go from, generalized ADP, he's being ranked just from the outfield perspective, in the top 10, anywhere between 6 to 10. So here's a good question too. And I'll tell you, so you look at, this is the way I always do this, John. I know you're an analytical guru, so I'm not an analytic guy. So I'm curious of your opinion on this after I tell you mine. But number one, I think when you just look at the outfield perspective, because we're talking about Mike Trout, obviously, you have Tatis, Soto, and as long as Acuna Jr. is healthy and good, he's got to be up there in those top 3. Mookie's got to be up there. Bryce has got to be up there too. But here's the thing: you're just talking about Mike Trout. It's like, okay, so if you don't take Mike Trout, what's the other options? Look at guys around him: Kyle Tucker, Jordan Alvarez, Luis Albert, Sterling Marte, Aaron Judge. So I think you have to think about, even though all those guys had very, very productive seasons last year, I still wouldn't take any of them over a healthy Mike Trout. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you. I mean, I already got over 300 players ranked. That's been done. Obviously, a lot changes with spring training.
Yo, look at this. This is what he gives me. All right, this is what I got. I need a friggin' magnifying glass to see this thing.
Hey, no, just put on your reading glasses, man. There's enough information. I mean, that thing probably, it has the top 35 for every position, top 100 outfielders, top 100 starting pitchers. So yeah, it's the one-stop shop. But I definitely got to bring my reading glasses nowadays. Now you're right. I mean, I have Trout ranked at number 9 in outfield. This was just a purely analytical approach. This was not how I'm going to draft. I still got another month before drafts. But yeah, I think you're right. I'm not taking him before Starling Marte. Kyle Tucker, for me, that's a close one. Buxton, he's another guy. I would probably go with Trout over Buxton. I mean, that's like which one of them is going to miss the most games. I mean, that's a game you're playing on that one because they're both probably going to miss games. But yeah, I think I'm more confident in him, at least in the upside over Mookie Betts. If you even throw Aaron Judge in there, I like Trout a little better than Judge as well. So yeah, it's almost exactly what you said. It's who do you take over them? So that's that first group that I see. Yeah, Tatis, Soto, Harper, and I'll even take Acuna because hopefully, the ACL is definitely going to have a little bit of drag on him, but he's potentially the number 1 overall pick.
Yes.
So if that knee gets, somewhat healthy, gets loosened up, doesn't really cause a big problem with his swing, even if it's May 1st and you get a full 5 months of 95% of Acuna, I'll take him over Trout. But yeah, I might have Trout penciled in at like 5 or 6 in terms of outfield. It's between him and Tucker for me.
Yeah, look, Kyle Tucker had an unbelievable season last year, right? I mean, I just know last year was, I'll be honest with you, last year was probably only my second full DFS kind of year. I always play season long. And for this discussion, we're talking both. Okay. Mainly this is a season long talk because we're talking about pre-draft, right? We have no idea what the DFS values are going to be. We'll get into that once the season starts. But Kyle Tucker was that guy that you watched his value just continue to rise. He was that low value, was an FFAP at many times, a fancy Firebox value play. And then he decided to turn it up and get to that next level. Now, when we talk about that, again, this is going to be a generalized show today, right? Because this is an overview. This is the first time we've been able to look at the stats and look at the players and look at the situations and try to figure out what's going on. So, John, there's one guy, I'm going to ask you who maybe, I know you probably got tons of them, but one guy to take that next step, regardless of position, right? Regardless of position. And then there's just one guy that I have on my list that I think takes that next step. And he plays multiple positions. And I love the dual position eligibility. Now, I've seen this guy overall overall as in the second base market, because he's primarily a second baseman, as number 12, but as high as number 5. And in a couple sites at number 4, I love Ketel Marte. I last year, Marte, to me, listen, Cutillo was unbelievable for Arizona. He was one of those guys I gravitated towards. And I look at the guys, and another guy was Jonathan India. So he was another guy. That's Cincinnati offensive firepower they had over there, which now to Lou Castellanos. So we'll see how that lineup looks. But I loved Marte. And I loved his situation. I loved that he was dual eligible. And he was always reasonable from a DFS level. But I'm looking at this list where obviously in the second base market, you have Trey Turner, who we talked about. We got Mookie Betts. You have Ozzie Albies, who I love Ozzie Albies. But then you're talking Whit Merrifield, Marcus Semien. Will Semien be able to duplicate what he did last year? I'm not sure. Altuve, who had a good year, but not a great year. Javier Baez, first year in Detroit. I don't know. Jonathan India, I really like him. And then you're looking at a consensus of maybe Marte. Now, John, I didn't look because I can't see right now where Marte is on your list for second baseman. But as far as taking the next step, do you like the Marte move? And who's another guy, regardless of position, that you think is going to take that next step this year?
Yeah, I mean, I do like Marte. I got him at 9 at second base, but he's kind of the last of that second tier. I got Trey Turner and really in a tier of his own. And then there's another 8 guys, and it's basically all the guys that you said for the most part. The two that I have ranked a little higher, once again, analytical approach, but also, I went through every player with a fine-tooth comb that I've ranked. Not looking at, I didn't get into batting order, where the free agents are signing and all those different types of things. But I'll stick with second base. And I'm not even going to answer your question necessarily to say take the next step. But because we're on second base, the two guys that intrigue me the most are Brandon Lowe and Jorge Polanco. Jorge Polanco is an underrated player. He's still fairly young. And, at 28 years old, I mean, he's just coming up. All right. But even back in 2019, he hit 22 bombs. Last year he was over 30, 98 ribbies, 97 runs, and chipped in 10 stolen bases. I mean, this is a 28-year-old. He got a good frame on him. He's not going to challenge for a batting title, but the past couple years, he's fluttering. I expect about a 270 out of him. I think he's going to fall under the radar where you could get him on the cheap. And same thing with Brandon Lowe. I mean, his power, I mean, he got a stick on him. And he can really bash that ball. So those are kind of two underrated guys that I could see really creep into that top 5 at the second base position that you wouldn't think about.
I love the Polanco play. I played him a ton last year. Dual eligible again, second base and shortstop. And if you look at the numbers, like John said, I mean, this is a guy who proved to be healthy, played 152 games last year. Right? He had almost 600 at bats. But again, really decent power numbers, 33 home runs. Didn't hit the 100 RBI plateau, but he was still right there. And listen, 267, you're almost hitting 270. That's not a terrible average, right? You're not talking about 220, 230, 270, which means he's going to have multi-hit games, right? That's what that means, right? So 157 hits in 152 games. Okay, that shows you right there. He's averaging at least a hit per game, right? So, when you're talking about Major League Baseball, whether it be head-to-head, whether it be roto, whether it be DFS, again, it's all about consistent production. You got to be careful with those power guys that go 0 for 4. You want to get a guy who kind of mixes it a little bit. You're going to get your power guys, but you also want guys that are going to give you a ton of power and a ton of contact ability. So, because then it'll give you that 1 or 2 points per game. So I like the Polanco play a lot. I feel like between him and Byron Buxton, like, that Twins team last year, they had a lot of firepower on there.
Yeah, no, they do. Buxton got to stay healthy. I mean,
well, that's true.
Last year in my draft, I mean, I'll tell you, I took Springer and Buxton, and it was a struggle for the first couple months of the season. Yeah, he's always intrigued us with his hit tool. He's an exciting defensive player, but that guy, is he really injury prone? I mean, he is to some extent, but the injuries have been all over the place. I mean, you can't fault him for breaking a bone, getting hit by a pitch. Like, I mean, that kind of thing happens. So, yeah, who knows? But that team has a lot of potential there. And even the power of oh my goodness, I'm drawing the blank. He's going to hit 190, but why am I drawing Miguel Sano?
Sano, man. Yeah, it's got to be Sano. It's like the Serrano of the Minnesota Twins.
Yeah.
Yeah, he can't. Serrano and Sano can't hit curveball. It's just what's going to happen. Foods checking in. What's up, Foods? Checking in as always. Actually checking in. Broad Street South. Check them out. No Filter Network. Look like doing some things with Tony Bruno next week or something. So check them out, guys, as well on a Saturday morning. Let's gravitate towards the pitching market, right? And again, this is get our feet wet a little bit. I'm getting excited already talking about fantasy baseball. I really am. I love fantasy baseball. One of the things it was the second sport I started playing. Obviously, started football, then I gravitated towards baseball and then to basketball. But I'll tell you, man, I told a lot of people, John, before that once you get into fantasy baseball, and again, the game's not for everybody. I get it, right? I understand. But it is a science more than any other sport, only because there's 162 games. It's a constant grind. You got the constant roster change. Oh, who's going to get added to the 40-man roster? Who's going to get called up? You got the 10-day deal, the 7-day deal. Like, you have all these different stints that you got to pay attention to, especially, listen, DFS is the easy part. Season long is the hard part because to continue to build your team throughout the entire year with all those parameters, listen, I'll tell you, hats off. I know John does it full-time, ridiculous. I don't know. Listen, I lay claim to these guys because it's a lot of work. I copy off their notes and form my own perspective. And then I have my own analytics I do behind. But, here's the thing. Pitching market is tougher than anything because of the injuries, because of the lack of rotation depth. Right now, you have pitchers that they skip starts now. Right, you never had this back in the day. Now, if you get a guy who's going to give you 12 to 13 wins, it's like you got the golden ticket, like American Idol. Right? I mean, that's what you have to look at. It's a shame, but it's the truth. So John, now I know last year when we did these preview shows, I was a big Trevor Bauer guy. I thought Trevor Bauer was going to be the top guy. I really did. Going to LA, I thought there's no way Trevor Bauer. He listen. It ends and starts with Trevor Bauer. It happened to be Walker Buehler, right? And we all know what's going on with the Bauer situation, right? Let's keep that at bay. But here's what I want to ask you, John, because last year he proved me wrong because he still had a good year. But I'm waiting for this year where Max Scherzer takes a step back. I'm waiting for that year. And I know he signed a big money deal with the Mets. So, and whenever the Mets sign somebody, it never works out. Hola, Johan Santana. But what I just keep thinking is this finally the year? And I'm not saying a terrible year, but that he's not going to give you those innings eating potential. Like, is this the year that Max Scherzer steps back, or is he still a top 5 pitcher?
Everybody wants to know. Look, I will say, and sometimes to a fault, but I kind of check myself. I always gravitate to some of these more veteran guys. And I know it's a polar opposite approach than a lot of the people in the industry. I'm not saying that I'm going to continue to expect the same guys. I mean, there is a drop off, and I fully realize this, but I also think that sometimes when you have your truly, truly elite players, they can pitch, hit, whatever, pick a sport. They can be effective, later in age than some others. And I think Scherzer is one of those guys. I mean, look at what Nelson Cruz is doing. Once again, is he really going to hit all those home runs at his age? I don't know. But you know what? I'll take a flyer on that than trying to hit a 1 in 10 shot on some rookie that may not even get playing time. It's even more so in baseball where, look, opportunity is so much. I mean, we talk about it in football. Opportunity in football is how many carries are those backs getting? Opportunity in football is targets. I harp on targets all the time. Yep. So there's something to be said with just playing time, So in terms of Scherzer, I mean, he's sitting there at 37 years old. For the most part, he's been consistent. It was just really that 1 year that, he had an injury issue. So there's definitely going to be a little bit of a decline. But, looking at, I'm pulling up my rankings. I mean, I still got him at number 3, sub 3 ERA, the whip sitting around the 1 mark. And I still got him well above 200 Ks. And I mean, how many guys really have a feasible shot at getting 250 Ks, 240 Ks? There's not many of them. So, yeah, I mean, I'm okay with Scherzer again, but I mean, one of these years he is going to drop off.
Yeah, he is. And Foods checking in says, I think Max still has something left in the tank. You mentioned 37 years old. Here's the thing, Foods. Here's the thing, John, and I will say, everybody out there, you heard John just say whip. If you can get a pitcher that's under a 1 whip, that's elite territory. Elite whip under 1, man. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, Max Scherzer, it's all about staying the test of time. Only three times out of the last 9 years was he above 1 for WHIP. 1.18, 1.11. That's not and even when he went above it, it wasn't ridiculous. So he has been the epitome of consistency. I don't know, John. It just scares me. I know he's had a dead arm issue before, right? He's had a back problem. There's a lot of things that he's had, and now he goes, at 37, he jumps over. But again, I mean, look at Justin Verlander. You look at guys back in the day. Look at Greg Maddux. I mean, these guys continue to pitch well into their late 30s and pitch predominantly well. So, I mean, listen, the odds are that he's going to do well. And the thing is, as long as he stays healthy. And at 37, listen, that's always going to be the question mark. It's always going to be the question mark. But now, how about the guy who came out of Milwaukee? Go ahead. What's that?
Oh no, you mentioned Trevor Bauer.
Yes.
And if you recall, we were very adamant last year around this time. And you said Trevor Bauer, it was your guy, and I called Lucas Giolito.
Yes.
And I don't think either one of us really won that argument. Okay. Giolito was serviceable. We know the whole Bauer thing. So I just putting it out there. I think we both lost on that one a little bit.
No, I think we did. But you know what? We both won on was there was two guys, and I'm going to get the Burns in a second, but there was two guys that we both mentioned. Number one, you were a big Walker Buehler guy because when I talked about Bauer, you're like, you liked you some Walker Buehler, and he had an unbelievable year. And I loved Zach Wheeler. A lot of guys were out on Zach Wheeler as a top pick, and he was a stud, right? Zach Wheeler was a stud. And the reason why is because he took that next step. When you're 28, 29 years old as a pitcher and you're finally hitting your stride, those next 4 or 5 years are going to be either really, really good or really, really bad. And I could just tell that he was primed and poised to have a very, very big year. And a lot of guys from New York media who I talked to were like, hey, we would have never gave him that money. And, that Philadelphia gave him because of his lengthy injury history, and they didn't think that he could take that next step. But I was like, look, man, I'm all in. We have a rotation of guys that are all question marks. Right now in Philadelphia, you don't know what to expect from Aaron Nola. Kyle Gibson came over and pitched very, very well. Will it continue? We're not sure. Ranger Suarez turned into a decent starter. Will it continue this year? I don't know. And will the knee, the other guy that I was big on with Zach Eflin, will the knee hold up? We don't sure. So a lot of question marks at Philadelphia. But to get back to the pitching pitching conversation in general, Walker Buehler, Zach Wheeler, good years. But how about the guy, or I should say kid, out of Milwaukee, and Corbin Burns, who was just like the Nolan Ryan Express out there, John, just mowing dudes down like ad nauseum every single week. It was the Corbin Burns show out there in Milwaukee. Number one, I mean, did you expect that to happen last year? And do you expect that to be much of the same next year? Maybe even popping off above Garrett Cole for that number one spot?
Yeah, no, I didn't expect it. I mean, he showed flashes the prior year. I'm the type that I want to see more of a track record. I've seen too many flashes in the pan, too many 1-year wonders, too many toughy roads out there.
Roads.
I'm not. Yeah, I'll take a guy for a flyer, but when it comes to draft time, so that's more free agent. I'll take a flyer on a guy, as an acquisition, but when it comes to drafting, I want more of a track record. So, I mean, yeah, he definitely has good stuff, but, in reality, not too many teams saw this guy. Not too many teams really had that much tape with him as a starter in the Major League Baseball. So, yeah, I mean, he maintained it, and, he ultimately, he even got better than, the year prior. So I'm starting to believe it more now. I have him, in that top 5, but I still can't quite put him in the conversation with a Garrett Cole, a Jacob deGrom. He could end up performing that way, but I need to see like one more year of this to really see what he got.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Right. I'm a firm believer of consistency, and I understand he's only 27 years old, right? And this goes right to my Zach Wheeler theory, right? When you hit 28 as a starting pitcher, that's when things really start to excel. I feel like they excel for him last year, but again, it was 1 year. Now, the previous year, he goes 4-1, only starts 9 games. So, last year was the first time he started double-digit games, right? So it's the first time. 167 innings pitched. All right, hit 234 strikeouts. I mean, listen, he was. We already know the .94 WHIP. He was insane. So again, I'm going to go back to my Mike Trout theory, John. And when I look at a guy like Corbin Burnes and say, who is around him, right? So whether it's John Kocur's top 5, whether it's Win Daly's top 5, whether it's Yahoo's top 5, whoever it may be. I mean, they're all going to be about the same. Where you guys like, you have DeGrom, you got Woodruff, you got Scherzer, you got Cole, you got Walker Buehler. To me, Garrett Cole, is the number 1, but I don't think I can feel comfortable taking Corbin Burnes number 2. I would much rather feel safer taking a guy like Walker Buehler number 2. I would much feel safer taking a guy, honestly, like his counterpart and Brandon Woodruff at number 2. Just because I need to see this play out. I need to see it play out longer. Even DeGrom coming off of injury, as long as he's healthy, at least I know what he can do when he is healthy, right? I think you open a show saying, if you don't hit one of your top guys in the first couple rounds, it's going to be a long year. You're always going to be trying to chase your tail, so to speak, right? So this is a very important play. And I know everybody, roster construction as it may be, you have to think about this. And this is, again, season long specific. You have to think about how many top arms are you going to have? And say you want 2. Just say we're going to do 2. So I can tell you right now, in a season-long league, I always want to get those top 2 studs. One of them has to 100% not only hit, but give you that expectation and probably exceed a little bit on what your preseason projection is in order for you to feel comfortable. So you're talking about Corbin Burnes is going to have to be that top guy in your draft. And you better hope, right? You better hope that he is going to prove out. Now, John, when we talk about the pitching perspective, and you're going a name that I think is very interesting, and because here's what happened last year in San Francisco. They did a really good job in signing a bunch of players to 1-year deals. One of them specifically was Kevin Gausman. Signed him a 1-year, $18.5 million deal, and he balled out. He balled out last year. Now he goes to Toronto. And speaking of, this is going to be a 2-part question. Speaking of Toronto, a guy that balled out for them now leaves and goes to Seattle, and Robbie Ray takes some big money. So could either one of these guys, John, with the years that they had last year, that a lot of people did not predict, Gausman is a fire thrower, right? He is a hard thrower. He can be hit if his location's off. And Robbie Ray obviously has 3-pitch potential and is more of a finesse style of pitcher. Both of these guys right there, could they be your second-tier starter in season long? Would you feel comfortable as they're your number 2 guy and one of those guys?
I wouldn't really feel comfortable per se. Yeah, look, I was a Gausman guy for years when he was in Baltimore. I had him on many teams waiting for him to break out. Never quite got there until finally, in his age 30 season, and even in the shortened season, he had a decent year. But he really broke out last year for the first time, at age 30. So yeah, the Giants, they've been working wonders with that pitching staff, like you said, bringing in guys that, haven't really performed overly well, just middle of the road guys, and really turn them into a good pitching staff. That's what really carried San Francisco most of the year. Going to a Toronto team, look, I don't know. It was I seen too much of that AL East and Gausman's failures. Toronto, I'm not sure where they're playing all their home games this year, but it was a very hitter favorable park for what it was last year. So I'm not as high on Gausman as I would be with Robbie Ray. Robbie Ray, similar, really last year was the first year that he broke out. His problem all along, he's a flamethrower. He always got the Ks. Question is, how many walks is this dude going to have? What's that whip number going to be? Is it going to be above 1.3? Because you can't have above a 1.3 and be your number 2 pitcher. Is it going to be above 1.2? I don't really want that as my number 2 pitcher either. But the dude is potentially getting 240 Ks. And I think that's going to translate. Seattle has a better pitcher's park than, what he had in Toronto. You hope whatever mechanical things and, his control that he figured out in Toronto hopefully stays with him in Seattle. So if I had to choose one, I would go with Ray. But I may feel a little more comfortable. Can I go back in the pan and go with Giolito again? I think I would take Giolito over Ray. Common theme of everything that we've been looking at is who goes in that category. And literally, I have Robbie Ray next to Gausman, Yu Darvish, Carlos Rodon, Giolito, maybe even Jack Flaherty, who had a poor year last year, but, looked like that up-and-coming top 5 ace for years to come. So, I probably wouldn't take either of them, hoping that, Carlos Rodon or a Giolito's there. I'd feel more comfortable potentially with one of those guys. But I think Ray would have more of a chance to repeat what he did than Gausman.
Yeah, it's a good point about Ray because, the theme of this show obviously has been consistency and guys you gravitate towards based on year. It's funny. In football, I've always been a 3-year average guy. I don't like to just go after the hot topic, right? He had one good year. If it's a rookie, it's different, right? You can't go back. But you bring up Robbie Ray. It's a good point because, listen, you talk about whip, talk about ERA, talk about he did not have a year like this since 2017. Like, we're not just talking about, Robbie Ray had a bad 2020, 2019. No, like, he has not been this good since 2017, where his whip was 1.15. He went 15-5. His ERA 2.89. Like John alluded to, you're talking about ERAs, the 4s, the 7s, the 6s. Like, and this guy is 30. Now, the only good thing about him is he's a lefty, right? So we've watched lefties dominate for specific periods over time. Speaking of a Philly guy, a Yankee guy's been all over, even Toronto, like a guy like J Happ. He was a guy that for a good period there was pretty dominant because he was a lefty, right? We all know the top lefty of Randy Johnson, but we're just talking specifically about borderline pitchers. So the other thing, John, is you mentioned Giolito, right? Now, that Chicago White Sox team, it's funny because last year, if you remember, we were really talking about in the preseason about that Chicago White Sox team, that they had a couple guys on that rotation that could kind of go for a Cy Young push. But their bats last year, guys like Lewis Robert, out of nowhere, and a gritty guy. I'm going to talk about him for a minute, switch it back to the offensive side, because, again, we talk about consistency. And Lewis Robert was a guy who gets you the stolen bases, gets you the multi-hit games. All right. He might not always get you the home runs, but another guy that could really, really help you when it comes to the outfield market, right? So a guy like Lewis Robert, did you project him to do pretty well last year like he did? And do you expect it to be more of the same this year too?
Yeah, last year, once again, he was a young guy. Yep. Great talent and, all the potential to do things. I didn't have him overly high. I think he was going a little higher in drafts than he should have. He put up a solid year, didn't play, once again, playing time. If you're only getting the guy for 275 at bats, that got to play in. That's not a 4th round pick. It's not a 6th round pick. So, but when he came on the scene, he played pretty darn well. Chipping in the stolen bases. If he can do 25 homers, 10 stolen bases, and hopefully have that decent average because he does have a very good, hitting eye. That's a guy that's solid. He's not necessarily going to win you a championship, but that I think he's going to be a solid, consistent guy for years to come. Not wowing you, not putting up first round numbers, but just one of those guys that's going to continually produce, and get you a lot of counting stats.
Yeah, I really like him. I'm going to gravitate towards him. I was always gravitated towards him through daily fantasy. I really liked. He was a very very good value. He was a FFVP for a while. You mentioned playing time. I think obviously he's proved that he's going to be the guy now in Chicago, which is a good thing in center field. They need that. They listen. There's a lot of historic center fielders they've had for the Chicago White Sox, so we could talk about that for another episode. But let's do this. We went about 40 minutes. Don't want to go all morning. I just want a little preview show. Get the juices going. Look at what we're kind of looking at as far as projection models and things of that nature. With the only thing we didn't touch on, John, was the closer market. Now, in fitting, as we close out this episode, let's touch on the closer market. And it's funny, me and John had an off-air discussion, and John was saying how it's always nipped him in the butt as far as injuries when he's been drafted closer. And I was a huge closer guy. So every season-long league I've always was in was always a two-closer league. So I wanted one that was predominant, whether it be Mo, right? And obviously, for those who don't know Mo, you should know Mo, but Mariano Rivera. I wanted that top guy. I always did. And again, I reached for him. It didn't matter. I wanted that guy. So this year, John, number one, the closing position has changed over the years. There's not many teams that are going to come in right off the bat and be 100% all in on their closer. It just doesn't happen anymore. There's a couple guys, but besides that, it's closer by committee. A lot of these managers now, they do gameplay situations. And I'll be honest with you, this is where you could tell the difference between a professional fantasy baseball player and a rookie. Because a lot of these names, you would have no idea who these guys are if you don't follow the game. So, segueing to this question, John. Number one, let's just get a couple of your top closers right off the bat because it's too early to get into sleepers and things of that nature. We got to see how this season plays out as far as contract negotiations to see what the lineups are like. Because one thing I'll ask you this, John, when I always did it, and I always looked at my closers, I always number one went to look at the rotation. Number two, obviously, this theory proved me wrong a few times, which was odd, but I always wanted a closer on a good team. I said, why do I want a closer on a bad team? Because they're not going to win many games. But for some reason, over the years, some major dominant performances from closers were on shitty teams. So, that doesn't always come to fruition. But when you're looking at the closer position, what are you zeroing in on as what makes up your projection model? And number two, what are those, top 2 or 3 or maybe 4 guys at the closer role, that you're looking at this year?
Yeah, the closer role is all about saves. Some leagues they've gone to, if it's a roto league, they've gone to a solds category, which is saves plus holds. Really waters down the market in terms of how much a save means because it means just as much as a hold. So now instead of one save a game, you're potentially getting a save and 2 guys getting holds. So now you have a lot of these, 8th inning guys, 7th inning guys that have great ratios and just have a full-time closer ahead of them that become very valuable. But saves is really what the closers are all about. It's funny that you said you like closers for, good teams that are going to win. And I think that does apply for the truly elite tiers. You think back, Mariano Rivera, think back about the guys that were, top 2, top 3 at the position. They were typically the guys that, they were playing into October. But I would usually take a separate approach. And everybody knows I bleed black and gold, even for my piss poor Pirates.
Here we go.
But think about all the closers that they had over the years getting 35 to 40 saves and you're getting them in the 10th round, 11th round. Felipe Vasquez, Mark Melancon. I mean, every year it's just who is the setup man. They trade the closer in, July or August. Setup man comes in, and next year he's the closer, and he does well. I mean, I will say Pirates have had a decent, bullpen for quite a few years now. That's about the only thing that they've had. But, I'm okay if they're, and once again, you said there's not that many etched in closers. So the Pirates have been a team that really have gone historically with a closer, where you could look at some other teams like the Royals, that are not only not a very good team often, but, also start flipping around that closer situation, playing matchups, situational things as the game goes on. So, in terms of the truly elites, I mean, to me, it's Josh Hader. Josh Hader, he has the job. It's his. He's fired. That's it. And then, I mean, you could look at Liam Hendricks. It just scares me with the whole Kimbrel thing. I think it was a great team move, but is he really going to, is Kimbrel going to steal 10 saves because, they're playing matchups? Is something going to happen? Could they even trade Hendricks and keep Kimbrel, come somewhere down the road? I'm not saying that it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but just the presence of Kimbrel, has me have Hendricks, a little bit below Hader. Otherwise, I would have them easily 1-2 interchangeable. And then truthfully, I think you got a bunch of guys. You have some closers, but what is it? Raciel Iglesias, who couldn't even hold the job down in Cincinnati, but now what? He's the number 3 closer with the Angels. Emmanuel Clase, or he didn't even have the job in Cleveland going into last year. So how much can you really count on these guys? You have your good old Kenley Jensen, who, once again, I mean, he didn't even have a lock on the job in LA over the past 2 years, where he had, hit some stumbling blocks. Ryan Presley, I know he's up there, but then there's just a bunch of guys. I'm going to wait a little bit. I'll wait until the 7th round, 8th round. You and I both, whether it's baseball, football, we're tier drafters. I mean, I think that's the best way to tier. Every time I'm looking, I mean, I highlight my spreadsheet and I say, look, I want a guy. Here's my top tier, 1 through 4. And then my second tier, 4 through 8. I need to get one of these guys. If I'm going and there's still a guy from that top tier and I'm up and the other 3 guys in that tier are gone, I'm taking that 4th guy, because I think he is in the same class as those other guys. So at the closer position, I think after those top 2, you got, 8, 10 guys that, you could throw in. And oftentimes in baseball, I'll even wait later. I'll wait and see, I'll take 1 closer, 2 closers, and I'll work that waiver wire. Some people go with, have Fab, which brings a little bit of a different mix. But if it's just a free agent pool, I'll get some waiver wire closers. I mean, I don't know what the stats have been over the past 2 years, but I mean, historically, you would have at least 50% of your closers turn over in a year.
Yep.
So much value is to be had. If I'm not going to pay up for Hader, which I probably won't, I'll just take out that next big group.
Yeah, it's exactly what we talked about. You can wait. You can afford to wait. So that's one thing we can afford to wait. Remember that. When it comes to the closer position, I'm a huge tier guy, just like John said. He's a huge tier guy. Listen, I am not taking the 12th best closer, okay, on the closer market. And the 12th best closer is like equivalent to like the 40th ranked outfielder, okay? So you got to be really careful with how you're doing your projection models. Like a couple questions coming in. We got, how early would you take Wander Franco? And Wander Franco, man, I'll tell you what, he was a DFS darling last year, man. He came in for that bare minimum 2,000 and went off, man. He was unbelievable. So what do you think, John? He's a 5-tool guy, right? He does it all. And, he's going to get you consistent points. Now, here's the thing. I honestly, last year, I gravitated towards Franco on the DFS side of things because he was so tool oriented when it comes to walks, when it comes to stolen bases, and he was filling up the stat sheet. But where would you go with Franco in a crowded outfield position?
I'm not very high on him, at least for this upcoming year. I think he could be a generational talent. I think he has, he got all 5 tools. So, but I don't know that he's developed that raw power yet. You also look at, where is he going to be batting in the order? Who's going to be hitting around him? What are those numbers going to look like? How much is he going to be stealing bases? I could see him, maybe getting to the 25 home run mark. I don't really envision him going much above that for this upcoming year. I think he's going to get drafted way too high on name value. And I mean, there's a ton of guys, shortstop. It's crazy how shortstop to me seems like such a deep position this year, where it used to be, one of the most shallow positions, just a handful of years ago. But Franco, he will be drafted before I'm willing to take him. I could see capping out at a 20 home run, 10 stolen base season. Is he really going to get up to, that 100 category? I don't think so. Can he get to 90? Maybe. I think more like a 90-80 one way or another. And the batting average, I don't see him hitting above 311 yet. Like 280 hitter maybe. So that's kind of the peak. So I'm not taking him overly high. I would take him at a middle infield spot more than I would draft him as my shortstop. And I know, look, that's my opinion. He's going to go well ahead of where I would draft him. But that's kind of what I'm going with, especially in I know you said in the outfield, I'm talking shortstop. I mean, outfield, I have him probably sitting around the 40th outfield, somewhere around there.
I like it. I mean, we just talked about this with Corbin Burns. We talked about, the consistency factor. We talked about, what is he going to do going ahead? Is it a 1-year wonder? Is it going to be able to mimic exactly what he did where he busted onto the scene, right? So many different perspectives to look at, but some really good info right there. And let's end on this. Adam checking in. What's up, Adam? As always, checking in. Avid follower, Heat Ratio Sports. Make sure you follow at Heat Ratio Sports. Follow at Win Daily Sports. Both of those, it's a multi-cast show, which is great on both platforms. Make sure you get both the tremendous content on both channels. Guys doing amazing work. So make sure that you hit that. And again, last night, John, DK special last night. I gotta say it. Hit the DK special last night. Obviously, if you guys don't know, you got to listen to the NBA Pre-Lock show every night, weekly on Win Daily Sports. Me, Ghost, Adam. We drop our props for profit. Last night, I threw in the DK special with Harden, Cat, and Embiid all scoring 25-plus points at plus 600. And guess what? It hit, and it hit on the final. Listen, Karl Anthony Towns had a fiery dunk down the lane that got on the 25 points, and then he went out of the game and never came back in. So thank you, Kat. Even though I don't like you, I appreciate what you did last night to put some money in my pocket. But Adam says, you guys think, we're going to end the show on this, Freddie Freeman is staying with the Braves, and if not, where's a team that you see him go? Listen, John, I mean, it's funny because, and I know everybody's going, this is the common consensus, right? That everybody's going to say Yankees. And I listen, I can't help but look at Freddie Freeman and look at Mark Teixeira like all over again. Like maybe it's me, maybe it's because they play the same position. I think Freddie Freeman's a better player, but just a situation, and I can't help but think of him in pinstripes. I don't know what it is, but the Braves have a big decision to make here. And listen, there's a couple moves, and not just Freddie Freeman and Carlos Correa as well, that once this lockout is over, it's going to be interesting to see where those two guys end up, where they stay, where they end up. That's, I think, the topic of conversation. But let's just say Freddie Freeman, just your overall gut. Does he stay with the Braves? And if he doesn't stay with the Braves, where's the overall gut say that he goes?
Yeah, I mean, earlier, like right after the season, I was pretty confident he was going to stick around with the Braves. No, I'm not so much. I mean, I think to me, if I'm the Braves, it's a no-brainer. I'm keeping him. I mean, he's a great ball player. He's a leader. He's still relatively young. He's a cornerstone of that franchise. And then you have these young guys, the Austin Riley, Mash, and Acuna, and even some younger guys on the pitching staff. So, I mean, if I'm the Braves, to me, it's a no-brainer. If he leaves, yes, I would say that the Yankees, who have really been looking for that first baseman for quite a few years since Teixeira, I mean, plugging in Luke Voigt, he was supposedly going to be the next guy, but they just keep plugging different guys in. Nobody's really taken over that job. I think that would be the most logical landing spot. But what I will throw out there, how interesting would it be if he ends up going to the Padres?
Oh,
I'm not saying it's going to happen, but look, the one thing, and I know we're ending on this conversation, but one thing that I will say to keep in mind for this whole upcoming season, the DH is coming to the National League. All right. That's going to happen. Like, I don't think that's it. That's not even part of this whole collective bar. Like that's pretty much a done deal. So
yes.
the savvy fantasy baseball players, especially for season-long drafts, are going to know that. I mean, there could potentially be, look at the catcher position, which is always overlooked, where some of these catchers on their day off is going to be getting DH at bats. So that catcher that otherwise would have got 300 at bats is getting 450. If you're in a weekly lineup league, look, those at bats can matter. Same thing. Look, Hosmer's there. You had that DH, Hosmer. It's like an open spot. So with these guys that are, free agents that are out there and that can be signed, there's ultimately another hitting spot for half the teams in the league, and the Padres have a pretty deep roster, but, where another guy could come in, they could spend, this is their window. Let's spend on that guy because we got room for another bat. Same thing ain't going to be true for the Pirates per se. They ain't got enough guys to fill out the 8 hitting spots that they have, let alone a 9th. So it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, but it's something to consciously think about, even if it's in the later rounds of a draft and you're sitting there and, we talked about playing time. I don't want to get too much into it, but that DH spot is going to open up additional playing time for some guys in the National League. And that could be the tiebreaker when you're torn between two different guys. Is one going to have more full-time at bats to potentially put up better stats? So Yankees 1 in terms of Freeman. I'm going with Padres 2 as a dark horse. And I think he's going to be a Yankee. I don't think the Braves are going to re-sign him, even though they should.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Listen, and here's we're definitely going to end the show on this because this is a real dark horse candidate, and I this isn't my idea. Okay, I listen. Being part of media, you come across some great articles, and there's 2 places that I love. For national recognition, I love The Athletic. Got my Athletic subscription. I'm a big Jason Stark guy. I love all the writers at The Athletic. But locally, okay, there's a guy named Evan Macy, does a great job for Philly Boys. And he wrote an article just this past week about what if Freddie Freeman came to the Phillies. Right now, hear this out. He makes a lot of great sense in this article. And again, it probably could be a pipe dream, but because we know the Phillies aren't comfortable going over that luxury tax. But if they certainly wanted to go all in, John, okay, the Braves offered, and this is straight from his article. Go check it out on Philly Voice. You check out Evan Macy. The article is rumored, MLB rumors, should the Phillies go after Freddie Freeman. It was published on February 23rd. And it specifically says that he turned down a 5-year, $135 million deal. He wants a 6-year deal, obviously. Why wouldn't he? Right. And the growing belief, he writes this is from Buster Olney. He puts the quotations here that the Braves will move quickly to settle on an alternative and move on to get past the conversation. The growing belief is that Freeman will land somewhere else outside of Atlanta. So his article is based on exactly what you said, John, about the DH, because the one part of the Phillies lineup that I think we can all be in agreement is the weakest link is Rhys Hoskins. He's very inconsistent. We don't listen. He is a flawed player, even though you may say he has good years. I get it, but he is not a consistent player that's going to help you win a championship. I'm sorry. He's just not. But now, if you were able to go above that luxury tax number, okay, which they would have to be able to do, okay, then they go after a guy like Freddie Freeman. And now that DH becomes a different story because you could even hide Rhys in the outfield from time to time, but now you have a consistent power bat from the left-hand position again with, with obviously JT Realmuto being in the middle, right? Because you probably would go, I would guess, Bryce, and then whether you go left, right, or left, right, left, but you would have more stability. But man, John, could you imagine? And he writes in 104 career games at Citizens Bank Park, Freeman has 15 home runs, 60 RBIs, and batting .287, and he's 32 years old. Which he's at that threshold where we just talked about prime, especially from the bat. So again, could you imagine if the Phillies went out there and signed Freddie Freeman? Wow. That would be amazing, man. It would.
It absolutely would.
Listen, is it far-fetched? Go ahead. No, I'm just saying, like, what do you think? Is it that far-fetched for that to happen?
It's not far-fetched, but I mean, it's like any team. Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't you want a top 3 player at any position? You know what I mean? So, yes, but I don't necessarily think it's the right fit. Like, yes, I would be happy if that happened, but you still got that hole on the left side of the infield that if I'm going to spend the money, I'm going to shore up that hole before I'm going to spend to upgrade Freeman over Haskins, or Hoskins. We talked, there's that open spot in the DH, but am I spending the money on that first base position knowing that I got that ugly hole at third base and at shortstop? It's just more about priorities. Yes, I think he would be a game changer in terms of the lineup. Obviously he's one of the best first basemen. But I don't know. I can't get past that glaring hole at third base. I really can't. And if they're going to spend money on a guy, I would spend it to fill that hole, not fill the first base.
On a closing note, I agree with that because that's why I'm a big Chris Bryant promoter here. I want Chris Bryant in a Phillies uniform. If you're going to go all in, like John said, because listen, we've already understood that Alex Bohm is not the answer at third base. So you need a third baseman, and I'm not playing Segura there forever. So I agree, John. That's one thing, 100%. I would go at the third base, but it is a nice pipe dream. And again, check out that article on Philly Voice by Evan Macy. He put some really good stuff in there. Just listen, he even labels it as a pipe dream, but you never know. I mean, stars could align, things could happen. Hey, James Harden's a 76er. Who would have thought about that? But listen, as always, want to appreciate everybody for tuning in on Saturday morning. Went a little overtime, but that's okay. We hit on a bunch of topics just as an opening segue into the fantasy baseball season. Next week, we'll be back talking other things as well, whether, positional analysis, sleepers, tier systems, guys that you may want to look for in your later stages of the draft. And then once the negotiations end, we'll be here with the DFS angles as well. So make sure you check out Win Daily Sports, check out Heat Ratio Sports. Both of them on all social formats. They're everywhere. All the guys, all the personalities. And again, tune in tomorrow night, Sirius Satellite Radio Channel XM, 87 XM. Tomorrow night, I'll be there live 9 to 11 talking tonight. Tonight, they'll be talking some fancy basketball live bets. And tomorrow, we will be talking the running back and the quarterback position as it going forward for NFL fantasy, mixed with some live betting as well. So make sure you check them out and check us out everywhere. So as always, for John, for myself, everybody stay safe, stay healthy, enjoy your Saturday, enjoy your Sunday. It's almost springtime, which is a wonderful thing, which means pretty soon we're going to hear that hit at a bat, smack at a glove, and then contract negotiations will be set, and we will get some baseball. So everybody have a great weekend, and we'll catch you next time.